Welcome to Breaking Sales, a podcast dedicated to helping you have tough, meaningful, and rewarding conversations with your prospects and clients. In meaningful, what we mean is these are the conversations you truly feel like you are the prospect or client's conversational peer. There's no anxiousness or uncertainty holding you back. You feel a sense of calm and confidence in asking the tough questions. You're not thrown off by the bad news, and you expect the prospect to think about and invest into the conversation as much as you do. On Breaking Sales, we use the filter of psychology and innate human behavior to deconstruct the many misleading sales approaches that actually work against your efforts to build trust and close the business. Let's get started. After interviewing almost 100 top sales performers across multiple industries, Pam and I discovered something that will probably surprise you. The best closers aren't trying to close at all. Remember, your prospects have their own ABC. Avoid being closed. The harder you try to close, the more they resist. It's a game you can't win using the old playbook. Top sales performers have mastered 4 key skills that make prospects want to move forward. Skills that have nothing to do with pressure and everything to do with patience and psychology. In a summary, those 4 skills are: become a conversational peer, remove your urgency and remain patient with the conversation, focus on facilitating the dialogue versus sharing expertise, help the prospect identify their own decision hurdles. We will go into all 4 of these in great detail. In part 1, we did reveal why traditional closing fails and the 3 stages prospects go through when debating change. Now we're sharing exactly what separates the top 10% from everyone else. These aren't techniques you can fake. They're fundamental shifts that transform how prospects experience the conversations that you have with them. If you're ready to close more deals by serving your prospects better, listen in. Let's go. All right, Pam, today I would like to do part 2 of closing.
Okay, I'm ready. Yeah.
Okay, so let's go through together these major closing skills. Now I'm going to tell our audience this. So if you recall from the previous episode, and that was closing part 1, we talked about part 2. What's cool about this part 2 is that Pam and I and Christy went out and we interviewed probably 80 or 90 top performers in sales across the country in a multitude of different industries. And we came up with a list of what the top closing skills are for these high performing professionals. We're going to share the top 4 with you today. It will have nothing to do with the ABCs of closing. All right. Always be closing. That is non-existent. Actually, if you look at the psychology of what it takes to help another human being decide on change. Your prospects, by the way, also have an ABC, and it's called avoid being closed. So you got to start thinking about that. Every time you go with the ABC, your prospect pulls out their ABC. All right. The first one. Let's dive into this. We're going to give you 4 top performers, and when they close, they look at themselves as a conversational peer. What that means is they don't look at themselves as a peer in title. They don't look at themselves as a peer in stature, but they do look at themselves as a peer within that specific conversation.
I think that's a good delineation.
Maybe we should kind of peel back a little bit, Pam, what that means then.
As you all know, listeners, when we use the words peer-to-peer in our coaching, sometimes if you're younger in your tenure or you're starting a new career in a new type of sales that you're not used to, you don't believe and you don't see yourself as a peer. So I like the way Dan has added this conversational peer to that word. In this particular conversation, I have to be your peer in order to be able to help you think through and debate change.
It's understandable, and Pam, you and I have talked about this, why some, and many actually, may struggle with this. You know, I get it, right? You might be in your late 20s, you could be in your mid 30s, you could be in your early 40s, whatever it might be, and you're sitting with a 55 or a 60-year-old individual who's got twice, 3 times the experience that you do, and they have a title that has a C in front of it of some kind. I get it, right? We are not telling you that you are that person's peer and to lie to yourself in that way. But what we are trying to help you do is find a way to calm down and trust yourself. Conversational peer means that in that moment, for those 60 minutes or those 45 minutes, your mindset is all about, I have one role or I have one responsibility here, and that is to help this other person determine how and if they might need help. And in that process, it may not include me. But that is my role here. And what's really interesting about that, if you reflect back on part 1, the previous episode that Pam and I did, we talked about the 3 stages of closing. That first stage of closing is actually all about and only about, is the topic that you are discussing with that prospect, is that topic in that moment of time, is it worth more time and effort for them to invest in it? That's the first level or stage of closing. And so I think it's easier to be a conversational peer when you know that's the only responsibility that you currently have in that moment. You don't have another responsibility. You don't have to impress them. You do not need to validate yourself. Your role is absolutely to determine, is this topic, this challenge, this issue within their business worth more time and effort for them to invest in it and explore it, period.
But maybe I'll play devil's advocate here for a second, Dan. Well, then why do I need to think of myself as a peer? Do I really need to position myself as a conversational peer in order to have that conversation with another person?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Pam. And I'd love to hear your answer, because and it might be different than mine, because my head goes to, stop putting your prospects on a pedestal. They haven't earned it yet. They're human beings. That's it. They're just human beings with more experience in that moment in time, maybe. You do not need to put them on a pedestal. You do not need to be subservient. There's no arrogance in this. There's no ego in it, but you don't need to be subservient either. You are having a discussion in 60 minutes of your time, your life, as well as the other person's. Your 60 minutes is not less valuable than the other person's 60 minutes.
Absolutely. And you know, Dan, you and I walk into rooms every single day where people who are far smarter than we are, far, like the level of responsibility and what they do for a living, we could easily say, oh my gosh, I'm not their peer. And that's not it doesn't have anything to do with that at all. It's our mutual time is extremely valuable. And I have one intent with this conversation. That's it. And if I don't think of myself as a peer in that moment, I will waste both of our times in this discussion.
That's very, very good. And I love that, because you're right. You will waste both of your times. It's mutual. You're wasting your own and theirs.
Got it.
So let's go to number 2, Pam. I love this. I love this one. I had no idea that this one was going to be in the top 5. So for our listeners, the number 2 skill set is that top performers are driven. They are driven on their process. Absolutely. They are almost relentless on their process, but they are very patient with their conversations. They don't skip around. They take their time. They gain clarity. They make sure that they understand what that prospect or client is actually saying. They're very patient.
Agreed that it was a surprise. But to your comment, Dan, on how many people we talk to, it's amazing how many of the ones that are truly excelling in their ability to become a sales professional, many of them touted patience. Many of them touted patience, especially when it came to being able to earn trust from the person across the table. One said it really well. The minute someone feels this level of impatience in a conversation, they start to really know this is a lot more about you as the sales professional than it is about me and whether or not this is the right decision for our organization. And I liked the way he phrased that.
I do. I like that a lot. That's well done. When I think about, and Pam, you and I talked about this in part one, the 3 stages that we look at from a closing perspective. You have to be patient in those 3 stages. So to remind our audience, our listeners, stage 1 of closing is really all about helping that prospect determine, is this worth their time and effort? Has nothing to do with you yet. Stage 2 is helping that prospect identify hurdles that they might face in pursuing a change, what those things might look like. Stage 3 is, should the solution or the outcome include you? And most professionals jump to stage 3 all the time. There's a lack of patience. Even if they get stage 1, they'll still jump to stage 3 and they forget stage 2, which is, are there going to be hurdles if this decision maker decides that they want to make a change?
Can we even do this? Can we realistically make this decision?
Yeah, I have a great story. So I was talking to a sales professional earlier this week, and they had this example come up where they got connected to a CFO. That CFO had just made a change to a different provider in their particular space a year ago. The sales professional met with the CFO. They hit it off. Our client, this professional, asked some really good questions. Did you get what you want from the change? If not, what happened? They asked good questions about, what are your other options? Is this worth looking into again? Is it worth just leaving it alone? What do you risk? What do you gain? All stage 1, right? But what this particular sales professional did, Pam, it was excellent, is that they understood, wait a minute, the CFO already went to the board a year ago and promoted this change to a different vendor. Are they really going to want to go back to the board 1 year later and pursue and suggest or recommend another change? How's that going to look on the CFO? So the sales professional, what did they do? They started asking questions. They literally started asking questions to the CFO. If you go back to the board with a different recommendation than where you are today, what happens? What are the consequences? How's the board going to feel about that? How are you going to feel about that? In essence, are you going back to the board and are you admitting a mistake? How will that be perceived? And went on with their questions, which was brilliant in the moment. The CFO actually said, you know what, you're asking a lot of good questions. I don't know if I'm actually ready for that. I need to slow this down maybe then. And so they both agreed to slow it down a little bit and start thinking about what would the ramifications be if the CFO went back and said or recommended a different change. And the other thing I want to remind the listeners is your urgency is irrelevant. And that's why I love the idea of be patient with your conversations. So,
Exactly. Well said.
Number 3. Pam, you and I have been talking about this for years. Top performers focus on shepherding or facilitating a dialogue, a conversation, versus having to have all the answers.
And it's funny, Dan, not everybody agrees with this one. They do. Then there's a lot of people out there that truly believe I need to be walking into every conversation with every single answer. And so it was refreshing. Again, the folks that are very good at closing deals understand it's not my job to have all the answers. Not whatsoever. Because my job is to facilitate that dialogue to help you identify whether or not you have the answers. It's not about me having the answers.
I have a good example of that, Pam. I think this week was the week of discussing or dissecting deals that were on the fence of closing, because this other conversation happened this week as well. So I'm talking to a commercial real estate expert, and he's got a really good story to tell this prospect. And in his story, he's got several factors that align very accurately with the other prospect that he's sitting in front of talking to. What he did, though, was patient. And what he did was he facilitated. So instead of coming out of the gate with these particular examples of how he knows he can help this prospect, he slowed down and he shared an example that might resonate with the prospect. One example of what he's done for another client. And now he's sharing that example with this current prospect. He shares the one example, but then what he does is he starts asking questions. He asks, does this example resonate in your business? He asked questions about, if it does, can you share more? If it doesn't, can you share? How would that play out in your business? What would you guys risk in doing something like that? What would you guys gain? And he would facilitate the dialogue based on his questions to help that prospect in that moment create a vision. Does this particular solution, does this particular benefit, this particular platform or technology or process, does it matter to me as the prospect? And he was able to do that through his questions, and those questions helped that prospect create a vision. And he did that throughout the meeting in multiple different examples. So what did he do? Yes, he did share, but he shared and then engaged and facilitated some critical thinking from that prospect about what would that look like in the prospect's world.
So I think you just said it, 2 keywords, critical thinking. And you know, Dan, I'm a big fan of this. At some point in time, our role goes from learning and absorbing information so we can understand the perceptions of our prospects to, I have to facilitate a dialogue that helps you do the critical thinking necessary. And this one, to me, number 3, focus on shepherding a dialogue versus always having the answers, is all about my role is to ask critical thinking questions. I'm even, Dan and I talk all the time. We still have prospect meetings a lot, and I'm practicing my upfront agreement. For those of you that know that terminology, I'm trying to let my prospects, Dan, know, I know you don't necessarily see this as my role today, but here is my role today. And here's why this is my role today. And I'm trying to set it up because I know what they're expecting. They're expecting me to have all the answers. They're expecting me to tell them why Lappin 180 is going to take them to new heights. They're expecting that. And so I'm trying to say, my job today is to simply ask you a lot of questions to help you think through this. And I know that's not what you're expecting from my role, but I want you to know it's the role I'm going to play today. This is one of my favorites.
I've actually heard you do that, and it's very effective. It's ironically extremely peer-to-peer. And
it's a big one for me.
Yeah, and what you're doing serves the prospect or the client who's sitting across from you.
Glad this one made the list.
That's a good example. So we'll go to number 4.
Number 4, last but not least, number 4.
You've heard us talk about this in part 1, and we are obviously talking about it again, closing part 2. You've heard us talk about it already in this conversation, and that is identify hurdles to the decision early. You know, Pam, you've got plenty of examples of this, I know, in the work that you've done. And so you want to kind of explain to the listeners what this means?
Dan's example was a really good example of how you have to help them think through hurdles. In the moment, as human beings, it's very difficult for us to take our blinders off. You know, we're looking and seeing what's right in front of us. We're in the moment, folks, and we need somebody to help us kind of take those blinders off and think forward to, all right, in the sequence of conversations that's going to happen, if this is a decision that's actually going to come to fruition in my organization, there's not just this conversation today. And so even in the example Dan shared, knowing that we had just made a change a year earlier, asking all of those questions, do they even know that you're not satisfied with the current result? Would this surprise them to hear that this is on your mind, that you're necessarily debating another change? What would their reaction be? All those things you ran through is a great example of my job is to help you think about these hurdles that will arrive. The one thing I love about psychology that psychology teaches us, no decision comes without a hurdle. No decision. Some of them are easier to jump over. Some of them are much more difficult. And my job as your trusted advisor is to help you think through those hurdles so you can start to prepare for them, have conversations around the hurdles that you know are going to show up, and understand the weight that those hurdles bear on the decision of the organization. And some folks are hurdles that cannot be cleared. And my job as your trusted advisor is to help you come to that conclusion before any energy and effort goes into something that cannot eventually come to fruition. Or my job is to help you think through that there are hurdles that could potentially hold you back that shouldn't hold you back. They're not as daunting as you believe them to be. So, and again, that goes back to that neutrality, that detachment. But all along the way, I got to start helping you anticipate the hurdles that are going to come with every next level of this conversation as it goes through your organization.
Yeah, that's very good. I almost forgot what I was going to add because I was so into what you were sharing. Think about this for our listeners. How many times out there does a prospect tell you, give me a week or give me 2 weeks? And the week or the 2 weeks comes and goes. And then you find yourself chasing. And we all know how we feel. We all hate it. None of us want to chase. There's just something about it that's a little bit degrading almost. It's like, come on, have some respect, right? Let us know, yes or no. You're 3 weeks past the time where they told you they would let you know, and you've still been ghosted. You have nothing. There's a lot of reasons that can happen. One of the main reasons, though, is this hurdle component. There's no doubt that a lot of times your prospect may not anticipate hurdles, or they may not communicate the hurdles to you. And so sure enough, when they go forward to make a decision, come to the decision, and then give their recommendation on what direction the business needs to go, there's a hurdle, there's a barrier. Asking the prospect about hurdles or barriers should be part of your conversation process. There might be some barriers you can't overcome, but you know what? That's okay. At least you know them. But there will be some barriers that you might be able to overcome. All because you took the time to be patient. You followed your process. And instead of leaping to raising your hand and saying, hey, we can help. Choose us, choose us, choose us. You slowed down and you started asking, how might this be perceived? How will this go? As Pam said, does the board know? Does the executive committee know? Does your boss know that you're not satisfied with your current process, your current partner, or whatever it might be? You definitely need to start slowing down, and trying to engage the prospect and or the client on what the hurdles to a decision or taking new action might be.
And there you have it, folks. Those are the top 4.
Pam said it earlier. I'll say it again as we wrap up. It is your mindset too, though. When you have an objective mindset where you are not putting pressure on yourself for some particular outcome, and you're not putting your pressure on yourself to be perfect or telling yourself, hey, don't screw it up, don't make a mistake. When you can alleviate all that negative thought process that causes anxiety, when you can alleviate it, these 4 closing skills actually become very common sense. Good luck. We hope you try them.
Thanks, listeners.
As I said at the outset of this episode, your prospects have their own ABC, and it's the opposite of what you've been taught. The moment you push with traditional closing tactics, they pull back. You've been there, you've seen it. But when you master these 4 skills, thinking like a conversational peer, staying patient, facilitating a dialogue instead of sharing expertise, and identifying hurdles early, closing becomes what it should be, helping the prospects make the right decision on change. And remember, sometimes the right decision is no change at all. As you think about what to implement and where to begin, start with being patient and facilitating a conversation. Focus on your curiosity, listening, and simply asking questions. These are skills that you already know how to use. Stop treating your prospect conversations like your future depends on it, because it doesn't. Bring some detachment into the conversation and focus on what's best for the prospect by avoiding the temptation to label what you hear or observe as good or bad. This will make you a conversational peer. Think about it. These skills are common sense. Let go of having to win, and you'll win more.